In the gentle realm of memory and magic, dear listener, there exists a tale woven from friendship, mischief, and the kind of loyalty that transcends time itself. Tonight, as you settle into comfort and allow your breathing to slow and deepen, we journey back to the beginning, not to the creation of an enchanted map, but to something far more precious, the birth of the souls who would one day pour their very essence into parchment and ink. Long before the Marauders map would reveal its secrets to wide-eyed students wandering Hogwarts corridors, long before its mischievous insults would perplex Severus Snape, or its delicate footprints would guide Harry Potter through darkness, there were 4 boys, 4 ordinary wizarding children, born into a world that did not yet know how profoundly they would mark it. Their stories began separately in different corners of magical Britain, under different stars and circumstances, yet fate, that curious weaver of destinies, was already drawing invisible threads between them. Let us begin, as all stories must, at the very beginning. James Potter entered the world on a bright March morning in 1960, in the comfortable and loving home of Fleamont and Euphemia Potter. The house, tucked away in the English countryside, was not ostentatious, but warm, filled with the particular coziness that comes from old magic and older love. Fleamont, inventor of the Sleek Easy hair potion, had built a modest fortune, but more importantly, he and Euphemia had built a home that radiated kindness. For years, the Potters had hoped for a child, watching as seasons turned and their hair grayed, until hope itself seemed a distant dream. Then, as if magic itself had finally listened to their quiet prayers, James arrived, small, squalling, with a shock of black hair that would never quite lie flat, and eyes that would one day sparkle with mischief and warmth in equal measure. From his very first breath, James Potter was loved beyond measure. His parents, older and gentler for their long wait, doted on their only son, but never spoiled his spirit. They taught him that magic was a gift, that kindness was strength, and that laughter was perhaps the most powerful charm of all. The Potter home was filled with light, enchanted candles that never guttered, windows that showed whatever weather one wished to see, and portraits of ancestors who chuckled and whispered encouragement. James's first magic came early, as it often does with strong wizarding bloodlines. At 18 months, he turned his mother's hair a startling shade of crimson when she suggested it was bedtime. Rather than scold, Euphemia had laughed, her red hair blazing like sunset, and Fleamont had scooped his son up, declaring him a natural transfiguration prodigy. In the Potter household, magic was never feared. It was celebrated, nurtured, guided with patient hands and loving wisdom. Not so very far away, though in circumstances quite different, Sirius Black was born into the ancient and most noble House of Black on a cold November evening in 1959. The Black family townhouse at number 12, Grimmauld Place, stood tall and foreboding in London, its windows dark, its magic ancient and proud and heavy with expectation. Sirius arrived as the eldest son, the heir, the one upon whom the weight of centuries of pure-blood supremacy would rest. His mother, Walburga, held him with hands that knew duty but questioned affection. His father, Orion, regarded his son with satisfaction. Here was the continuation of the Black line, pristine and pure, unsullied by Muggle blood. But from the very beginning, little Sirius possessed something the Blacks had not anticipated, a wild, untamable spark. Even as an infant, his grey eyes held a glint of rebellion, a promise of storms to come. Where other pure-blood children were raised in hushed reverence of their lineage, Sirius would grow to question. Where others learned to look down upon those deemed lesser, something in Sirius's heart would refuse. His first magic manifested dramatically at age 2, when he set the curtains of his nursery ablaze in a fit of temper. The flames had been silver blue, touched with the same fierce energy that would characterize all of Sirius's magic. His mother had been horrified, not at the display of power, but at the lack of control. Control, she impressed upon him even then, was everything. But control was the one thing Sirius Black would never fully master, nor would he truly want to. His younger brother, Regulus, would arrive a few years later, and while the two would share the same blood, the same aristocratic features, the same ancestral magic flowing through their veins, they would walk very different paths. Even in childhood, Sirius felt the suffocation of Grimmauld Place, the weight of portraits whose eyes followed with judgment, the cold expectation that he would become another link in an unbroken chain of black family pride. He dreamed, even then, of flying free. In a quieter corner of the wizarding world, in a modest cottage in the north of Wales, Remus John Lupin was born on a gentle spring evening in 1960, just a few weeks after James Potter took his first breath. His parents, Hope and Lyle Lupin, welcomed their son with joy unmarred by prestige or expectation. They were not wealthy, nor were they from ancient bloodlines. Lyle worked for the ministry in the department for the regulation and control of magical creatures, and Hope, a muggle, had fallen in love with magic and the gentle wizard who wielded it. Remus was a quiet baby, contemplative even in infancy, with soft sandy hair and eyes that seemed older than his years. He observed the world with patient curiosity, rarely crying, often content to simply watch dust motes dance in shafts of sunlight. His mother would hold him close, singing Welsh lullabies, while his father would read to him from wizarding storybooks, his voice warm with hope for all the adventures that awaited his son. The Lupin household was filled with love, simple, unadorned, pure love. There were homemade meals and hand-knitted blankets, bedtime stories, and patient explanations of the magical world. Lyle taught his son that magic came in many forms, and that kindness was its own enchantment. Hope showed him the beauty of the Muggle world, taking him on walks through meadows where ordinary flowers bloomed without spells, where streams ran clear and cold and utterly unenchanted, yet beautiful nonetheless. Remus's first magic was subtle, befitting his gentle nature. At 3 years old, he mended a torn page in his favorite storybook, his small fingers glowing faintly as the paper knitted itself back together. His parents had exchanged proud, tearful glances. Their son was magical, truly magical, and the world stretched before him, bright with possibility. But fate, as it so often does, had darker plans woven among the light. On one terrible night, when Remus was not yet 5 years old, everything changed. Lyle had offended a werewolf named Fenrir Greyback during an interrogation, speaking cruelly in anger about werewolves being soulless and deserving nothing but death. Greyback, who heard these words, decided upon a revenge most cruel. He would ensure that Lyle Lupin spent his life loving and raising a werewolf. The attack came when the moon hung full and terrible in the sky. Greyback broke through the wards, his monstrous form tearing through the night, and before anyone could stop him, he had bitten young Remus. The boy's screams echoed through that quiet Welsh valley, And when morning came, the Lupin family was forever changed. Remus survived, but the child who had been so gentle, so promising, so full of potential, now carried a curse. Once a month, when the moon waxed full, he would transform into the very thing his father had once condemned. The guilt Lyle carried was unspeakable. Hope held her son closer, loved him fiercer, but nothing could change what had been done. From that moment forward, Remus Lupin learned what it meant to be different, to be feared, to carry a secret that could never be fully shared. His childhood became shadowed, marked by monthly disappearances, by parents who moved frequently to avoid suspicion, by the growing awareness that he would never be quite like other wizarding children. Yet somehow, perhaps because of this very burden, Remus developed a capacity for compassion that few possessed. He learned to read faces, to sense pain in others, to offer quiet comfort. His loneliness cultivated in him a hunger for true friendship that, when finally found, would prove unbreakable. And finally, in a humble home in a small wizarding village, Peter Pettigrew was born in 1960, a few months after Remus Lupin. He came into the world unremarkably, the only child of parents who were neither wealthy nor influential, neither particularly talented nor especially ambitious. They were ordinary folk, kind enough, who ran a small shop selling basic potion ingredients and magical household supplies. Peter was a small baby, with thin, mousy hair and watery eyes that seemed perpetually worried, even in infancy. He was not remarkable in any particular way. His first magic came late, at nearly 4 years old, and even then it was a small thing, levitating a toy across his nursery. His parents praised him enthusiastically, perhaps overcompensating for their awareness that their son would likely never be extraordinary. Growing up, Peter was the sort of child who lingered at the edges of things. Not quite neglected, but not quite seen either. His mother fussed over him, worried constantly about his health, his safety, his future. His father was often distracted by the shop, by finances, by the daily concerns of keeping a small business afloat in a competitive, magical marketplace. Peter learned early to watch others, to mirror those who seemed successful, to attach himself to those who shone brighter. He was not naturally brave, nor naturally talented, but he possessed a cunning that would serve him well or ill, depending upon how one viewed the choices he would eventually make. He learned to laugh at others' jokes, to agree with stronger personalities, to make himself useful in small ways that earned him tolerance, if not quite friendship. But beneath the eager-to-please exterior, beneath the nervous laughter and the slightly desperate need for approval, Peter harbored dreams just as powerful as any other child. He dreamed of being important, of being powerful, of being remembered. He simply had not yet learned what price he might be willing to pay to achieve these things. As Peter grew, he remained small, and he learned that being small often meant being overlooked. But being overlooked, he also discovered, meant that one could observe, could learn secrets, could slip through cracks that larger personalities never noticed. So there they were, dear listener, 4 boys, born within months of each other, scattered across magical Britain like seeds waiting for the right soil. James, blessed with love and confidence. Sirius, burning with rebellion and longing for freedom. Remus, marked by tragedy and hungry for acceptance. Peter, overlooked and yearning to matter. They did not know each other yet, They could not know that their lives would become so thoroughly intertwined that separating their stories would become nearly impossible. They could not know that together they would create something magical that would outlast even death itself, a map that was never just a map, but a testament to the fierce and complicated bonds of boyhood friendship. The threads were being spun, invisible and inevitable. Fate, patient and persistent, was drawing them all toward a castle in Scotland, where their true story would begin. But for now, in these quiet years before Hogwarts, they were simply children, learning magic, dreaming dreams, becoming the people they would one day be. James learning, confidence tempered with kindness. Sirius learning that family was not always blood. Remus learning that monsters could be more human than humans themselves. And Peter learning to watch, to wait, to want. The stage was being set. The players were finding their places. And somewhere in the future, a blank piece of parchment waited to become extraordinary. Rest now, dear listener, and let these beginnings settle softly into dreams. The story has only just begun, and there are many gentle hours of tale-telling yet to come. Close your eyes and imagine 4 young faces, not yet friends, not yet brothers in all but blood, not yet the Marauders, but soon, very soon, the magic is already gathering, even if they cannot yet feel it. The Hogwarts Express stood gleaming at platform 9 3/4 on the 1st of September, its scarlet engine releasing gentle clouds of steam that curled and danced in the morning light. The platform bustled with the organized chaos of families saying goodbye, trunks being loaded, owls hooting indignantly from their cages, and the air thick with excitement and nervous anticipation. James Potter arrived with his parents, his trunk already loaded with the finest equipment money could buy, not from arrogance, but from Fleamont and Euphemia's desire to give their beloved son every advantage. James himself was practically vibrating with excitement, his hazel eyes bright, already scanning the crowd for potential friends, potential adventures. His hair stuck up at impossible angles despite his mother's attempts to smooth it down, and he wore his new robes with the confidence of a boy who had always been told he could accomplish anything. "Remember, James," Fleamont said, his hand warm on his son's shoulder, "Hogwarts will teach you magic, but it's up to you to learn wisdom." "And be kind," Euphemia added, kissing his cheek despite his embarrassed protests. "Power without kindness is hollow, my darling." James hugged them both fiercely, then bounded toward the train, his natural charisma already drawing the attention of other students. He found an empty compartment midway down the train and claimed it, sprawling across the seat with the easy ownership of someone who had never doubted his welcome anywhere. Not far away, Sirius Black arrived with a very different entourage. His mother, Walburga, stood rigid and imposing, her face severe beneath her elegant hat. Her farewell was not warm, but instructional. "Remember who you are, Sirius. Remember what you represent. The Black family name is not to be tarnished by foolish friendships or soft sympathies. You will be in Slytherin, as every Black has been. You will uphold our values." Sirius's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but he nodded, his grey eyes revealing nothing. His father gave him a curt nod, and then they were gone, leaving Sirius standing alone on the platform, his trunk at his feet, feeling both liberated and strangely hollow. He boarded the train, walking down the corridor with his aristocratic bearing, head high, shoulders back, every inch the pure blood air. He passed several compartments filled with students, some of whom recognized the black family features and whispered reverently. Sirius felt the familiar suffocation beginning to close around him. Then he reached a compartment where a boy with impossible hair sat grinning at him. Looking for a seat? James Potter asked, his smile open and genuine, free of calculation or expectation. Plenty of room here. I'm James. Sirius paused. Something in that grin, something in the casual welcome, spoke to the part of him that had always chafed against his family's cold formality. Sirius, he replied, and stepped inside. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that moment, fate had begun its work in earnest. Further down the platform, Remus Lupin said goodbye to his parents with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. So intense, it made his stomach hurt. Hope held him tightly, whispering encouragement. Lyle, his face still shadowed with guilt, even after all these years, pressed a small package into his son's hands. For difficult nights, he murmured, and Remus understood. Inside would be potions, perhaps, or charms to help manage his condition. Dumbledore has made arrangements. You'll be safe, Remus. And you deserve this. You deserve Hogwarts. Remus nodded, not trusting his voice. He had been shocked when his Hogwarts letter arrived, certain that no school would accept him, not with his condition. But Dumbledore had written personally, assuring the Lupins that accommodations would be made. Still, the fear lingered. What if the other students discovered his secret? What if he hurt someone during his transformation? He boarded the train with his patched robes and second-hand trunk, his face already showing the weariness of someone who carried burdens too heavy for 11-year-old shoulders. He found a compartment near the back, hoping to remain unnoticed, and settled in with a book, building walls of solitude before anyone could build them around him. But fate, as it happens, had other plans. Peter Pettigrew arrived at the platform in a flurry of his mother's anxious instructions. She fussed over his robes, checked his trunk 3 times, reminded him to write weekly, to eat properly, to avoid trouble, to make good impressions. Peter nodded at everything, his watery eyes darting around the platform, already searching for someone, anyone, who might be important, might be worth attaching himself to. His mother finally released him, dabbing at her eyes, and Peter hurried onto the train. He walked through the corridor, peering into compartments, assessing. When he passed a compartment containing 2 boys who radiated confidence and ease, one dark-haired with aristocratic features, one with messy black hair and glasses, he hesitated. These boys looked important. They looked like they mattered. Peter knocked softly on the door. "Is there room?" James looked up and grinned. "Always room for one more. I'm James. This is Sirius." Peter shuffled in gratefully, introducing himself, already laughing a bit too enthusiastically at James's jokes, already watching Sirius with the careful attention of someone who knew how to read power. The train journey northward was long and winding, dear listener, carrying its precious cargo through the English countryside as afternoon light turned golden, then amber, then slowly faded into dusk. In the compartment, James and Sirius discovered an immediate kinship. Both had sharp wits. Both loved the idea of adventure. Both possessed a natural confidence that drew others to them. They talked about Quidditch with passionate enthusiasm, debated which house they hoped to join. James declared for Gryffindor with certainty, while Sirius grew quiet, and said nothing about his family's expectations, and shared sweets from the trolley with the easy generosity of boys who had never known want. Peter laughed at their jokes, agreed with their opinions, made himself useful by fetching things from the luggage rack, by running to the trolley for more pumpkin pasties. He was not part of their natural chemistry, not quite, but he was there, and he was eager, and that seemed enough for the moment. As evening deepened outside the windows, James grew restless and suggested exploring the train. The three boys ventured out, and it was during this wandering that they passed the compartment where Remus Lupin sat alone, reading by wandlight. James, never one to let anyone sit lonely if he could help it, slid open the door. "Hello there. I'm James Potter. This is Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew. Want some company?" Remus looked up, startled. His first instinct was to decline, to protect them from the secret he carried, to protect himself from inevitable rejection. But something in James's open expression, in the genuine friendliness of the offer, made him hesitate. "Remus Lupin," he replied softly, and after a moment's consideration added, "Company would be nice." They crowded into his compartment, and James immediately began regaling them with stories about his parents' inventions, while Sirius interjected with dry, witty observations that made even Remus smile despite himself. Peter laughed loudly at everything, and slowly, incrementally, the walls around Remus's heart began to thin, just slightly. When the train finally pulled into Hogsmeade Station, the four boys disembarked together into the cool night air, where Hagrid's enormous form and booming voice called first years to the boats. They climbed into one together, these four who had been strangers mere hours ago, and crossed the black lake in darkness, watching as Hogwarts Castle revealed itself, its windows blazing with light, its towers reaching toward the star-filled sky. "Blimey," breathed James, and even Sirius, who had been raised to hide his emotions, looked awed. Remus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope. Peter simply stared, overwhelmed by the magnificence of it all, already imagining himself important within those ancient walls. The sorting ceremony took place in the great hall, beneath the enchanted ceiling that showed the night sky, hundreds of candles floating overhead, casting gentle flickering light across the assembled students. The four boys stood together in the crowd of first years, watching as the sorting hat was placed upon each child's head in turn, listening as it called out destinies: Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, Slytherin. When Black Sirius was called, a ripple went through the hall. Everyone knew the Black family. Everyone knew where he belonged. Sirius walked to the stool with his head high, his face betraying nothing, but his hands, had anyone noticed, were clenched into fists. The hat descended over his eyes, and for a long moment there was silence. Those who watched carefully might have seen Sirius's lips moving, might have heard the desperate whisper, "Not Slytherin. Please, not Slytherin." The hat seemed to consider, and then, with what might have been amusement, declared loudly, "Gryffindor." The Slytherin table fell silent in shock. The Gryffindor table erupted in cheers, somewhat uncertainly at first, then with full enthusiasm, and Sirius Black walked to the red and gold table with his head still high, but now his eyes blazed with something like triumph, like freedom, like a future he might choose for himself. James was sorted next. "Gryffindor!" came almost immediately, and he joined Sirius with a whoop of delight. the two already slapping each other on the back like old friends. Lupin, Remus, took longer. The hat murmured things that only Remus could hear about his mind, his courage, his fears. When it finally called Gryffindor, Remus felt a cautious joy. Perhaps here, in a house known for bravery, his secret might be safer. Perhaps here he might find belonging. Pettigrew Peter was sorted into Gryffindor as well, and though the hat had hesitated, sensing something in Peter that gave it pause, it ultimately sent him to join his new friends at the red and gold table. The four sat together at the feast that followed, passing dishes of roast chicken and potatoes, of treacle tart and pumpkin juice, their faces glowing in the candlelight. Already bonds were forming, gossamer thin still, but present. James's natural leadership, Sirius's sharp humor, Remus's quiet wisdom, Peter's eager agreement with everything. They did not yet know what they would become to each other. They did not yet know about full moons and secret transformations. They did not yet know about animagi or enchanted maps or legacies that would outlive them. But the foundation was being laid, dear listener, brick by brick, laugh by laugh, shared glance by shared glance. As the feast concluded and prefects led first years through the castle's twisting corridors, up staircases that moved and past portraits that called out greetings and warnings, the four boys found themselves in Gryffindor Tower. The common room wrapped around them warmly, crackling fire, deep red furniture, windows overlooking the grounds, the smell of old books and wood smoke and magic. They climbed the spiral staircase to the first-year boys' dormitory, where 5 four-poster beds waited, hung with scarlet velvet curtains. James immediately claimed the bed by the window. Sirius took the one beside him, and after a moment, Remus chose the bed on James's other side. Peter took the 4th bed, completing their little cluster. As they unpacked and changed into nightclothes, talking excitedly about the day, the castle settling into night around them, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, that they had found something rare. "This is going to be brilliant," James declared, already in bed, his arms behind his head. "Absolutely brilliant." "Better than brilliant," Sirius agreed, and for the first time in his life, his smile held no shadows of Grimmauld Place. Remus said nothing, but he smiled in the darkness, holding this moment carefully, afraid to hope too much, but unable to help himself. Peter echoed James enthusiastically. "The best. We'll be the best friends Hogwarts has ever seen." None of them could have known how prophetic those words would prove to be. Outside their window, the moon hung thin and silver in the September sky, a waning crescent, harmless for now. But it would grow full again soon, and with it would come the first true test of the friendship that had only just begun to bloom. But for tonight, dear listener, let them rest in innocence. Let them dream young dreams, these 4 boys who would become legends, who would become the Marauders, who would create magic that would endure long after their own stories ended. The castle keeps watch, the portraits doze, the stars wheel overhead, and in a dormitory in Gryffindor Tower, 4 11-year-old boys sleep, not yet knowing how profoundly they would change each other's lives. The real story is only beginning. Rest now, and let these images carry you gently toward dreams of your own. The discovery had been made during the autumn of their 5th year, though, in truth, the seeds had been planted much earlier. By this time, James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter were inseparable, a unit so complete that most students could hardly imagine one without the others. They moved through the castle like a small weather system, bringing chaos and laughter wherever they went. Beloved by most, exasperating to many, but undeniably legendary. The other students knew them well by now. James Potter, whose transfiguration talents had already caught Professor McGonagall's reluctant admiration, despite his infuriating habit of showing off. Sirius Black, who had fully embraced his rebellion against his family's dark values. His handsome face often split with a grin that promised mischief. Remus Lupin, the quiet one, whose careful wisdom often tempered the others' wilder impulses, whose monthly illnesses most students accepted without question, and Peter Pettigrew, always trailing slightly behind, always eager to please, always there. But there was another truth, known only to these four, that bound them even more tightly than shared dormitories and inside jokes. They knew Remus's secret, and they had done something remarkable about it. The discovery of Remus's lycanthropy had come in their second year. Inevitable, really. Once Sirius's sharp mind began tracking the pattern of Remus's absences with the lunar calendar. Rather than recoil in fear or disgust, rather than report him to the authorities or distance themselves for safety, James and Sirius had done something that Remus, in his darkest moments, had never imagined anyone would do. They had decided to become animagi. The process had taken nearly 3 years of secret study, of late nights poring over books in the restricted section, borrowed without permission, naturally, of dangerous practice and painful failures. Peter had joined their efforts too, determined not to be left behind, though his talents were lesser and his transformation would prove the most difficult. But they had persevered, these loyal friends, and by their 5th year, they had succeeded. James could transform into a magnificent stag, powerful and graceful, with antlers that could keep even a werewolf at bay. Sirius became a large black dog, shaggy and strong, able to play companion to the wolf during the long nights of the full moon. And Peter, after much struggle, managed to become a small rat, useful for reaching places the others could not, for slipping through cracks and triggering mechanisms. They had given themselves nicknames, names that would become legendary, though they did not yet know it. Moony, for Remus and his monthly transformation. Wormtail, for Peter's rat form with its long, naked tail. Padfoot, for Sirius's dog form with its large padded paws. And Prongs, for James's stag with its proud antlers. With these transformations, Remus's darkest curse had become something bearable, even something approaching adventure. The 4 of them would slip out during full moons, roaming the Hogwarts grounds, exploring the forbidden forest, discovering secret passages that even 1,000 years of students had not mapped. The wolf was no longer alone in his suffering, and Remus wept the first time he understood what his friends had sacrificed for him. 3 years of dangerous study, the breaking of serious magical laws, all for his sake. "You're our brother," James had said simply, as if no other explanation were needed. And he was right. No other explanation was needed. It was Sirius who first suggested the map, one evening in late October, as they sat in their dormitory, planning the next full moon's adventure. Rain pattered gently against the windows, and the fire crackled warmly in the common room below. But here, in their space, surrounded by Quidditch posters and scattered parchment and the comfortable disorder of teenage boys, the seeds of legend were being planted. "We must have explored every corner of this castle by now," Sirius mused, stretched out on his bed with his hands behind his head. Every passage, every shortcut, every secret door. Not every corner, Remus corrected gently, looking up from the book he was reading. There are passages in the dungeons we haven't fully mapped, and I suspect there are routes we've missed near the 7th floor. My point, Sirius continued, undeterred, is that we've discovered more about this castle than probably any students in history. And what do we have to show for it? The satisfaction of knowing, Peter offered hesitantly. The ability to sneak anywhere we want, James added with a grin. Exactly. Sirius sat up, his grey eyes gleaming with excitement. We can sneak anywhere. But what happens when we leave Hogwarts? All this knowledge, all these discoveries, they die with us. Unless we record them, Remus finished softly, understanding dawning in his amber eyes. Not just record them. James was leaning forward now, catching Sirius's enthusiasm like a flame. We could create something useful, something that shows not just the passages, but the people moving through them. A map, Peter breathed, his eyes wide. Not just a map, Sirius corrected, his grin becoming almost feral. A magical map, one that tracks everyone in the castle, one that reveals every secret passage, one that's interactive, charmed to show real-time movement. The room fell silent as the enormity of the idea settled over them. What they were proposing was magic of an incredibly advanced nature, a combination of charms, transfiguration, enchantment, and dark arts detection that would challenge even adult wizards. It's impossible, Remus said finally, but his tone held wonder rather than dismissal. We became animagi, James pointed out. We were supposed to be too young for that too. We're the Marauders, Sirius declared, standing now, pacing with the restless energy that always accompanied his best ideas. We've already broken more rules than any students in decades. We've mastered magic that 7th years haven't touched. Why should we let impossible stop us? Remus was quiet for a long moment, his scholarly mind already racing through the magical theory that would be required. Finally, he spoke. We'd need to establish a connection to the castle's own magic. Hogwarts is sentient, in its way. We'd need to tap into that awareness. Dark arts detection, James added, his mind spinning, to differentiate between people. Some kind of tracking charm that can identify individuals. And it would need to be concealed, Peter contributed. Hidden from teachers, from other students. It should look like nothing at all until activated. Blank parchment, Sirius nodded. We'd need a trigger phrase to reveal it, and another to hide it. Again, they looked at each other, these 4 15-year-old boys, and something passed between them. Recognition of the magnitude of what they were proposing, yes, but also absolute certainty that they would attempt it. They were the Marauders. This was what they did. We'll need to research, Remus said, already making mental lists. Months of research, maybe years. Then we'd better start now, James replied, pulling out fresh parchment. Let's begin with what we know about locator charms. And so, on that rainy October evening, with the castle settling into sleep around them and the fire burning low in the common room below, the Marauders' map was born, not yet in form, but in intention, in the fierce determination of 4 friends who had already proven that magic worked best when fueled by loyalty and love. The months that followed blurred together in a haze of secret study and careful experimentation, dear listener. the four boys approached their project with the same dedication they had brought to becoming animagi, but with a new confidence born of that earlier success. They divided the work according to their strengths, each taking responsibility for different aspects of the enchantment. James, whose transfiguration skills were remarkable even by Professor McGonagall's exacting standards, focused on the map's ability to transform, from blank parchment to detailed diagram, from static drawing to living, moving representation. He spent hours in the library studying advanced transfiguration theory, experimenting with ways to make ink flow and shift without constant magical input. Late at night, by wandlight, he would practice on scraps of parchment, making lines appear and disappear, making dots move across paper, muttering to himself about permanent versus temporary transformation, about magical sustainability, about creating spells that would last for decades without renewal. The trick, he explained to the others one evening, is making it self-sustaining. We can't have it drawing on our magic. We won't be there. It needs to pull from the castle itself. Sirius took on the darker aspects of the magic, the detection charms, the identity tracking, the spells that would allow the map to distinguish between different people. His family's library, which he had always despised for its dark content, suddenly became useful. He wrote home, his only correspondence with Grimmauld Place, requesting books on tracking spells, detection magic, and identification charms, claiming they were for a project on dark arts defense. His mother, pleased that Sirius was finally showing interest in the Black family's magical legacy, sent volume after volume of restricted material. She didn't need to know that her rebellious son was using Black family magic to create a tool for breaking school rules. Brilliant, isn't it? Sirius would say with dark humor. Using their own magic against everything they stand for. He experimented tirelessly, testing different ways to tag individuals, to track their movements, to differentiate between students, teachers, ghosts, and even Mrs. Norris, Filch's ever-watchful cat. The magic was complex, requiring a deep understanding of how identity itself could be magically defined and monitored. Remus, with his methodical mind and endless patience, took on the most challenging aspect, connecting their map to Hogwarts itself. The castle was ancient, soaked in 1,000 years of magic, with a kind of awareness that most students never perceived. To tap into that awareness, to convince the castle to share its knowledge, required magic of exceptional subtlety. He spent weeks in the library, researching the castle's history, studying the work of the founders, trying to understand the deep magic that Rowena Ravenclaw, Helga Hufflepuff, Godric Gryffindor, and Salazar Slytherin had woven into the very stones. He discovered references to the castle's sentience, to its ability to change and adapt, to respond to need. The castle wants to protect its students, Remus explained during one of their planning sessions, his voice thoughtful. That's its fundamental nature. If we can present our map as a tool for that protection, for awareness and safety, the castle might accept our enchantment. You want to ask the castle for permission? Peter asked, confused. In a manner of speaking, Remus smiled. It's about working with the magic that's already here, rather than forcing our own magic onto it. Collaboration, not domination. Peter, for his part, contributed in ways that suited his particular talents. He was meticulous about details, about record keeping, about testing and retesting their work. While he lacked the raw magical talent of the others, he had a kind of persistent dedication that proved invaluable. He kept careful notes of their progress, tracked which spells worked and which failed, managed their supplies of parchment and specialized ink. More importantly, his small rat form proved essential for exploring the castle's hidden spaces. Wormtail could slip through cracks in walls, could follow pipes and ducts, could reach spaces that even the stag, dog, and wolf could not access. He mapped secret passages that had been forgotten for centuries, finding routes between floors that even the ghosts had overlooked. "Found another one," he would announce proudly, and the others would gather around as he described his discovery, Remus carefully adding it to their growing network of passages. The actual creation of the map began in the spring of their 5th year, when their research finally felt complete enough to attempt the actual enchantment. They chose their parchment carefully, not too new, not too old, something that felt right in their hands, that seemed to resonate with possibility. They worked in the room of requirement, that magical space that appeared only when truly needed, providing them with privacy and all the tools they might require. The room had configured itself into a workspace that would have made any professional enchanter jealous. Large tables covered with ingredients and reference books, perfect lighting, even a comfortable seating area for when they needed to rest and rethink their approach. The enchantment had to be layered, built up slowly like an artist adding brushstrokes to a canvas. Each charm had to be woven carefully into the next, each spell integrated so perfectly that the whole became greater than its parts. James went first, his wand moving in precise patterns as he established the base transformation charm. The parchment shimmered, accepting his magic, becoming something more than ordinary paper, becoming potential, becoming promise. Sirius added his detection and tracking enchantments, speaking in the language of old magic that his family had passed down for generations. The parchment darkened slightly, as if absorbing shadows, as it learned to sense and remember and distinguish. Remus performed the most delicate magic of all, his wand barely moving, his voice scarcely above a whisper, as he connected their creation to Hogwarts itself. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen, and then the parchment glowed with a soft golden light, the castle's acknowledgement, its acceptance, its blessing. Finally, Peter added the detailed information they had gathered, the passages, the shortcuts, the secret ways through the castle. Under their combined magic, ink began to flow across the parchment, forming the outline of Hogwarts, showing corridors and rooms with stunning accuracy. They worked through the night, dear listener, adding refinements, testing, adjusting, pouring not just magic, but love into their creation. This was more than a tool. This was a piece of themselves, a testament to their friendship, a gift to their younger selves who had been lonely and lost before finding each other. As dawn began to color the sky outside, they spoke together the words that would activate the map. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." The parchment burst into full detail, showing every corridor, every classroom, every secret passage. And more wonderful still, small dots appeared throughout the castle, each labeled with a name. They could see Professor Dumbledore moving through his office, Professor McGonagall already awake and preparing for the day, early rising students beginning to stir. "We did it," James breathed, his voice full of wonder. "Look," Sirius pointed to 4 dots in the room of requirement. labeled Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. That's us. Remus's eyes were bright with unshed tears. It's perfect. Peter laughed with pure delight. We're brilliant. We're actually brilliant. They spoke the words to conceal it. Mischief managed. The map went blank, innocent, waiting for the next time it would be needed. The Marauders map was complete, and somewhere in the future, a boy with messy black hair and his father's eyes would inherit this gift, never knowing how much love had been woven into every enchantment, how much friendship had been poured into every spell. But that story, dear listener, is for another chapter. For now, let us rest with this moment of triumph, of four friends standing together in the dawn light, holding the proof of their brotherhood. Close your eyes now and dream of magic made manifest, of friendship made eternal. The map is waiting, patient and silent, ready to guide generations yet to come. Sleep now, in the warmth of knowing that some things, some precious things, last forever. The first true test of the Marauders map came on a crisp November evening in their 5th year, just weeks after its completion. The four friends huddled in an alcove on the 3rd floor, the map spread between them, its surface glowing softly with enchanted ink in the wandlight. James traced a finger along a corridor, watching the tiny labeled dots moving through the castle. Filch is on the 4th floor, he whispered, his eyes gleaming with mischief, and Mrs. Norris is prowling near the library. Snape's in the dungeons, Sirius noted with satisfaction, spotting the dot labelled with their least favourite Slytherin's name. Even now, years after their first antagonistic encounter, Severus Snape remained a source of conflict. His dark interests, his cruel wit, and his particular loathing for James all combined to create a rivalry that sometimes turned ugly. We should test the passages, Remus suggested, ever practical. Make sure the map's accuracy holds while we're actually moving through them. They chose a route that would take them from Gryffindor Tower to the kitchens, a journey that normally required descending multiple staircases and navigating well-patrolled corridors. But the map showed them a different way, a passage behind a tapestry on the 7th floor that led down through the walls, emerging near the portrait of the fruit bowl that concealed the kitchen entrance. Peter kept watch while James pressed the stones in the correct sequence. The wall swung open silently, revealing a narrow passageway that smelled of dust and old magic. They slipped inside, and the wall closed behind them, leaving them in darkness broken only by their wandlight. According to the map, Remus murmured, studying the parchment. This passage runs behind the charms classroom, then curves down past the entrance hall, and should bring us out exactly where we want to be. They moved through the passage, their footsteps muffled, their breathing quiet with the thrill of successful sneaking. The map proved flawless, every turn exactly where it should be, every distance precisely measured. When they emerged near the kitchens, finding themselves exactly where the map had promised, they grinned at each other in the darkness. "Brilliant," James declared softly. "Absolutely brilliant." They tickled the pair in the portrait, and the kitchen door swung open, revealing the vast, warm space where house elves were already preparing tomorrow's breakfast. The elves, delighted as always to have students visit, immediately began pressing food into their hands: treacle tart and pumpkin juice, chocolate frogs and fresh bread with butter. As they sat on the large wooden tables, swinging their legs and eating their midnight feast, watching the house elves work with cheerful efficiency. The four friends felt the deep satisfaction of their accomplishment. The map wasn't just magical. It was freedom. It was power. It was the ability to move through Hogwarts as if they owned it, as if the castle itself had welcomed them into its deepest confidences. To the Marauders, Sirius raised his goblet of pumpkin juice, and to mischief well managed. They drank to that, these four boys who had created something that would outlive their friendship, outlive even their lives, though they could not know that yet. The pranks that followed became the stuff of Hogwarts legend, dear listener. With the map in their possession, the Marauders elevated rule-breaking to an art form. They could see authority figures coming from corridors away, could plan their escape routes before they were even needed, could time their mischief with precision that seemed almost supernatural to their victims. Peeves, the castle's resident poltergeist, became an unlikely ally. The Marauders learned his patterns from the map, learned when and where he liked to cause chaos, and began leaving him anonymous notes suggesting targets for his particular brand of mayhem. Filch would find himself drenched in ink while chasing what he thought was a student, only to discover Peeves cackling above him. Snape would find his pathway blocked by suits of armor that Peeves had animated at precisely the moment the Slytherin needed to get to class. The map allowed them to coordinate pranks of stunning complexity. They enchanted the Slytherin common room entrance to sing opera whenever someone spoke the password, a charm that took Professor Flitwick 3 days to remove. They turned the corridor outside the potions classroom into a swamp, a technique they would later teach to a pair of red-headed twins, though that's another story. They charmed the suits of armor to perform a choreographed dance during dinner, moving in perfect synchronization to invisible music. But their pranks were never truly cruel, even when directed at Snape, though Sirius sometimes pushed boundaries that made Remus uncomfortable. James, despite his showing off and his occasional arrogance, had internalized his parents' teachings about kindness. Their mischief was meant to entertain, to challenge authority, perhaps, but never to genuinely harm. Well, almost never. There was one incident in their 6th year that Remus would always remember with a chill of horror. Sirius, angry at Snape for something, the specifics lost to time and teenage drama, had told him how to get past the Whomping Willow, the enchanted tree that guarded the passage to the Shrieking Shack, where Remus transformed each month. If Snape had followed those instructions during a full moon, he would have encountered a werewolf. He would have been killed, or worse, infected, and Remus would have been the instrument of that tragedy. James had found out just in time, had raced after Snape and pulled him back from danger, earning Snape's eternal resentment rather than gratitude. For James had seen him afraid, had saved his life, and Snape could forgive neither. Sirius had been unrepentant at first, his black family cruelty showing through, but Remus's devastated expression had finally broken through his bravado. "I could have killed him," Remus had said quietly, his voice hollow. "I could have killed him, Sirius, and you would have made me into the monster I always feared I was." The friendship had fractured, just slightly, just for a while. Sirius had apologized, had seemed genuinely remorseful, but something had been revealed, a capacity for callousness that worried Remus, even as he forgave. The map had felt heavier in their hands for a while after that, as if even it understood that power could corrupt, that mischief could cross lines into darkness. But teenage boys are resilient, and friendships at that age bend rather than break, usually. They move past it, though more carefully, with Remus serving as the conscience of their group, always pulling them back from edges they might not see themselves. The map also facilitated gentler pursuits, dear listener. James used it extensively in his increasingly desperate attempts to win over Lily Evans, the red-haired Gryffindor, whose intelligence and spirit had captivated him since first year, but whose patience with his showing off had worn thin by their 5th year. The map allowed James to accidentally encounter Lily in corridors, to time his arrivals at the library to coincide with hers, to know when she was heading to the Quidditch pitch so he could be there, perhaps practicing some particularly impressive flying that just happened to occur when she was watching. For years, Lily had rebuffed his advances, irritated by his arrogance, disgusted by his treatment of Snape, who had been her childhood friend, unimpressed by his constant need for attention. But the map also showed James something important. It showed him Lily's kindness, the way she stopped to help younger students, the way she visited the hospital wing to sit with 6 students who had no other visitors, the way she worked tirelessly as a prefect, not from a desire for power, but from genuine care for others. Watching her dot move through the castle, James began to understand what true strength looked like. Not the flashy magic he had always relied on, but the quiet courage of consistent compassion. Slowly, very slowly, he began to change. He stopped hexing students in the corridors for entertainment. He used his Quidditch fame to defend younger students rather than to show off. He learned, painfully and imperfectly, to grow. By their 7th year, when James had finally matured enough to deserve her attention, Lily began to see him differently. The map showed their dots drawing closer together, spending more time in proximity, until finally they were often side by side, in the library, in the common room, walking the grounds together. Sirius watched this transformation with mixed feelings, pleased for his friend, perhaps slightly jealous of the attention James now devoted to Lily, but ultimately supportive. Remus simply smiled, having always known that James had this capacity for growth within him. Peter proclaimed it wonderful and made himself useful carrying messages between James and Lily during their early, tentative courtship. The map, which had been created for mischief, became witness to a love story that would shape the wizarding world, though none of them could know that yet. Quidditch games were another arena where the map proved invaluable. James, as Gryffindor's star chaser and eventual captain, used it to study the movements of rival team members between matches, to understand their patterns, to predict their strategies. It wasn't quite cheating. The map didn't work during actual games, showing the pitch as blank space, as if the magic recognized that some competitions needed to remain fair. But it certainly gave Gryffindor advantages in preparation. Sirius, who played Beta with aggressive enthusiasm, would pore over the map with James the night before matches, watching how the opposing seeker liked to patrol the castle, whether they seemed nervous or confident based on their restless pacing or calm stillness in their dormitory. The Gryffindor team won the Quidditch Cup in the Marauders' 6th and 7th years, and while talent and teamwork were the primary factors, the map's intelligence gathering certainly hadn't hurt. On one memorable occasion, the map helped them discover that the Slytherin team was planning to curse James's broom before a crucial match. The Marauders watched through the map as several Slytherin dots gathered suspiciously near the broom shed, and they were able to intervene, though the resulting confrontation led to 2 weeks of detention for all involved, a price they paid gladly. During their final year at Hogwarts, as the shadow of war began to lengthen across the wizarding world, the map took on additional significance. Lord Voldemort's power was growing, his Death Eaters recruiting among the pure-blood families, and even within Hogwarts, allegiances were being tested. The Marauders used their map to keep watch, to notice when students slipped away to secret meetings, to see which corridors were being used for clandestine conversations. They couldn't prevent the darkness that was coming. They were still just students, still just teenagers despite their talents. But they could observe, could warn, could occasionally intervene. They watched as Slytherin students who would later become Death Eaters began meeting in the dungeons at odd hours. They noticed when Regulus Black, Sirius's younger brother, started taking long, solitary walks to the edge of the grounds, his dot moving with what seemed like reluctance toward some unseen meeting. Sirius's face would tighten when he saw his brother's name, but he never spoke of what it meant, what choices Regulus was being forced to make. The map showed them a Hogwarts that was changing, where the innocent mischief of their earlier years was being replaced by something darker, more dangerous. They were growing up, and the world was growing darker, and even the map, that testament to friendship and pranks, couldn't protect them from what was coming. But still, they used it. Still, they found moments of joy in it. Remus would track the movements of a fellow student he fancied, blushing when the others teased him about it. Peter used it to avoid awkward encounters with students who intimidated him. Sirius watched his brother's dot sometimes, late at night, when he thought the others were asleep, perhaps hoping to see something that would tell him Regulus wasn't lost to the darkness of the Black family legacy. And James, now head boy to everyone's surprise, though Lily, now head girl, had seen his potential long before others, used the map to patrol the castle, to keep students safe, to be responsible in ways his younger self would have mocked. Their final weeks at Hogwarts passed too quickly, as all precious things do, dear listener. The map accompanied them on one last nighttime adventure, a tour of all their favorite places in the castle, the spots that held the best memories. They stood in the passage where they'd first tested the map, sat in the kitchens where they'd celebrated countless small victories, visited the Shrieking Shack where they'd spent so many full moons together as animals, brothers in a way that transcended human speech. On their last night before graduation, they stood on the astronomy tower, the map spread before them, watching the peaceful castle sleep below. All those dots, all those lives moving through the corridors and dormitories, students who had no idea that 4 boys had mapped every inch of their world, had created magic that would outlast them. "We should pass it on," Peter suggested. "Find someone worthy to inherit it." "Not yet," James said firmly. "We might still need it. War's coming. The map could be useful." Sirius nodded, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "We'll keep it safe, together, like everything else." Remus carefully rolled up the parchment, his fingers gentle on the map that had changed their lives. "Mischief managed," he whispered, and the map went blank. They couldn't know, standing there in the starlight, that within a few short years, everything would fall apart. They couldn't know about betrayal and death, about prophecies and sacrifice, about how their brotherhood would be tested beyond endurance and found wanting. For now, they were simply 4 friends, graduating together, facing an uncertain future together, still believing that their friendship was strong enough to weather any storm. The map was safe in James's pocket, waiting for the next chapter of its story. And somewhere in the future, a boy with his father's messy hair would receive it as a gift, a legacy he wouldn't understand, from friends who had loved each other unto death and beyond. But tonight, dear listener, let us rest here, in this moment before the darkness, when 4 boys stood together under the stars, still innocent, still whole, still believing in the power of friendship to conquer all. Close your eyes now, and let these images carry you into dreams of starlight and friendship, of magic made manifest, of love that endures. The map is sleeping, blank and peaceful, holding all its secrets close. And you, dear listener, can sleep too, wrapped in the warmth of knowing that some things, the best things, are worth preserving, worth remembering, worth passing on. Rest now. Rest well. The story continues tomorrow. Graduation came in the spring of 1978, a ceremony held beneath clear skies, with the Great Lake sparkling in the distance and the castle standing proud behind them. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew crossed that threshold from students to adults, their friendship intact, but about to be tested in ways their younger selves could never have imagined. The wizarding world they emerged into was not the one they had left 7 years earlier. Lord Voldemort's power had grown from whispered threat to undeniable reality. Families were going missing. Murders were reported in the Daily Prophet with increasing frequency, and fear had begun to seep into even the most secure, magical communities. The Ministry of Magic seemed helpless, infiltrated by those who served the Dark Lord, and traditional pure-blood families were choosing sides, some reluctantly, others with enthusiasm. The 4 Marauders made their choice immediately and without hesitation. They would fight. They joined the Order of the Phoenix, the secret organization led by Albus Dumbledore, dedicated to resisting Voldemort's rise. It seemed natural, almost inevitable. They had spent years pushing boundaries, breaking rules, testing authority. Now they would use those same skills in service of something greater than pranks and mischief. The map came with them into this new life, tucked safely in James's possession. They had hoped to use it the way they once had, to gain advantage, to see what others could not see, to move unseen through danger. But the war did not confine itself to Hogwarts corridors, and the map's magic, so powerful within the castle walls, had no reach beyond them. Still, James kept it close, a talisman of better days, a reminder of who they had been before darkness demanded they become something else. The early days of their involvement with the Order were marked by a strange mixture of purpose and uncertainty. They were young, barely out of school, but already they were conducting reconnaissance missions, serving as guards, fighting in skirmishes against Death Eaters who had once been their classmates. James and Lily, who had married in a small ceremony attended only by their closest friends, found a cottage in Godric's Hollow, a peaceful village where they hoped to build a life despite the war raging around them. The map hung on their wall for a time, framed behind protective glass, a piece of art that only they understood. Visitors would glance at it, seeing only blank parchment, never knowing that with the right words, it would reveal the intricate magic of 4 boys' friendship preserved in ink. Sirius, who had fully severed ties with his family after his brother Regulus's death, a death shrouded in mystery that Sirius refused to discuss, threw himself into the war with reckless courage that worried his friends. He took the most dangerous assignments, volunteered for the riskiest missions, as if trying to prove something to himself or perhaps to atone for the black family name he carried like a curse. He lived in a small flat in London, and when the others visited, they would sometimes pull out the map, activating it with their old passwords, watching the corridors of Hogwarts move with new students' dots. It felt like looking into another world, one where the greatest dangers were detentions and failed examinations, where friendship was enough to conquer any challenge. "Remember when our biggest worry was avoiding Filch?" Sirius would say, his handsome face shadowed with something that might have been regret or longing or simply exhaustion. "We were children," James would reply quietly. "We didn't know how good we had it." Remus faced his own particular challenges. His lycanthropy made employment nearly impossible. The wizarding world's prejudice against werewolves had not diminished, and in times of war, suspicion fell even more heavily on those considered dangerous or different. Dumbledore used him for missions that required someone who could move among werewolf communities, trying to prevent Voldemort from recruiting entire packs to his cause. It was dangerous, lonely work. Remus would disappear for weeks at a time, living rough, transforming in forests and caves without the comfort of his friends' animal forms beside him. He grew thin, worn, the premature aging that his condition caused becoming more pronounced. The map, when he saw it during rare visits, reminded him of a time when he had not been alone, when his curse had been bearable because it was shared. Peter, smallest and least naturally talented of the 4, struggled to find his place in the order. He was not skilled in dueling, not powerful enough for frontline combat, not clever enough for the strategic planning that others managed. He ran errands, carried messages, served as lookout. Useful work, certainly, but not the heroic role he had perhaps imagined for himself. The others tried to include him, to make him feel valued, but Peter could sense the truth. He was the weak link, the one most likely to fail when things became truly dangerous. The resentment this knowledge bred in him was subtle, quiet, growing slowly like rot in wood, invisible until the structure could no longer bear weight. The war intensified as the years passed, dear listener, and the innocence of their Hogwarts days seemed more distant, with each battle fought, each funeral attended, each friend lost to the darkness. The Order of the Phoenix suffered casualties. Good people, brave people, gone in flashes of green light or found too late, their homes marked with the dark mark hovering overhead. James and Lily welcomed a son in July of 1980, a baby boy they named Harry, with his father's impossibly messy black hair and his mother's brilliant green eyes. The map, which had been a symbol of mischief and youth, took on new significance. It was part of Harry's inheritance, though his parents could not know how or when it would reach him. James would hold his son and think about the future, about Harry attending Hogwarts someday, perhaps discovering the map, perhaps using it as his father had done. The thought brought both joy and sorrow. Joy at imagining his son's adventures, sorrow at the uncertainty of whether James himself would live to see that day. Sirius became Harry's godfather, a role he took with fierce seriousness. He would visit Godric's Hollow whenever possible, holding his godson with unexpected gentleness, making silly faces to elicit giggles, promising the baby that he would teach him to fly, to prank, to live with the kind of courage and mischief that made life worth living. "He'll be a marauder," Sirius declared, and James had laughed, though Lily had given them both stern looks that didn't quite hide her smile. Remus visited less frequently, always afraid that his presence might somehow endanger the child, always worried that his condition made him a liability. But when he did come, he would read to Harry from the same storybooks that had been read to him as a child, his gentle voice soothing the baby to sleep. Peter came too, bearing gifts, cooing over the baby, seeming genuinely delighted by his friend's happiness. None of them noticed the shadow in his eyes, the way he sometimes looked at James's comfortable home with something that might have been envy, the way he flinched when others discussed battle strategy as if they didn't quite trust him to understand. Then came the prophecy, those terrible words spoken by Sybil Trelawney, overheard by a Death Eater, carried to Voldemort. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. Harry Potter, not yet 2 years old, became a target. Voldemort believed the prophecy pointed to him, believed that this child somehow held the key to his downfall, and decided that the simplest solution was to eliminate the threat before it could grow. James and Lily were forced into hiding, their cottage in Godric's Hollow, protected by the most powerful magic available, the Fidelius charm, which would hide their location inside a single person's soul. That person, the secret keeper, would be the only one capable of revealing where they were hidden. If the secret keeper remained faithful, they would be safe, invisible even to Voldemort himself. Their obvious choice was Sirius Black, James's best friend, Harry's godfather, the one person James trusted above all others. They prepared to perform the charm, to bind their secret to Sirius's keeping. But at the last moment, Sirius suggested a change. "It's too obvious," he argued, his grey eyes intense with what seemed like genuine concern. "Voldemort knows we're brothers in all but blood. He'll come after me, use Veritaserum or Legilimency or worse to extract the information. I'm too obvious a target." "Then who?" James asked, though he felt a chill of premonition, as if the map itself, which hung still on the wall, was trying to warn him of something just beyond perception. "Peter," Sirius said. "No one would suspect Peter. He's too small, too unremarkable. Voldemort would never think we'd trust our greatest secret to him. It's the perfect bluff." Peter, when told of the plan, had protested, claimed he wasn't brave enough, wasn't strong enough for such responsibility. But his protests had seemed like false modesty, and eventually he had agreed, his watery eyes shining with what they interpreted as determination, but might have been something else entirely. The Fidelius charm was cast, and the Potter's location was bound into Peter Pettigrew's soul. Only he could reveal where they were hidden. Only he could betray them. And betray them he did. The reasons for Peter's betrayal were complicated, dear listener. A mixture of fear, ambition, resentment, and the slow corruption that comes from always being the least, the smallest, the weakest. Voldemort's agents had approached him, had promised him power, had threatened him with death, And Peter, who had never been truly brave, who had always attached himself to stronger personalities, had made his choice. He told himself it was survival. He told himself James and Lily were doomed anyway, that Voldemort was too powerful to resist, that at least this way he might live. He told himself many things, but at the core, Peter Pettigrew chose to save himself at the cost of everything he had once claimed to hold dear. On the night of October 31st, 1981, he gave up the Potter's location, and Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow like a dark wind, like death itself, and the map that hung on the wall could do nothing to protect the family it had been meant to celebrate. The map could not warn them, could not fight for them, could not do anything but hang silent and useless as green light filled the cottage, as James died trying to give his family time to escape, as Lily died shielding her son with her body, as ancient magic, the magic of love and sacrifice, rebounded Voldemort's curse and somehow, impossibly, left Harry alive. When the Aurors arrived the next morning, they found the cottage destroyed, the Potters dead, and a baby crying in the ruins. They collected evidence, documented everything, including a strange piece of blank parchment that had fallen from the wall, its frame shattered. Someone, perhaps a young Auror who recognized it as magical, confiscated the map. It was logged, catalogued, and eventually made its way into Argus Filch's office, added to his collection of contraband items confiscated from students over the years. The map had come home to Hogwarts, but its creators were scattered. One dead, one falsely imprisoned for crimes he hadn't committed, one living among the creatures he transformed into, one hiding as a rat in a wizarding family's home, his betrayal complete and unsuspected. The aftermath was chaos compounded by tragedy. Sirius, learning of James and Lily's deaths, had tracked Peter down, confronted him in a Muggle street. But Peter, cunning in his cowardice, had shouted for all to hear that Sirius was the betrayer, then caused an explosion that killed 12 Muggles, cut off his own finger, and transformed into a rat, disappearing into the sewers while leaving Sirius to take the blame. Without a trial, in the chaos following Voldemort's apparent defeat, Sirius was thrown into Azkaban, the wizarding prison guarded by Dementors, those soul-sucking creatures that fed on hope and happiness. He would spend 12 years there, suffering for crimes he hadn't committed, unable to defend himself, unable to tell anyone that Peter Pettigrew still lived. Remus, learning that his friends were dead and Sirius had apparently been their betrayer, found himself utterly alone. His last friends, or so he thought, had either died or turned traitor. The map, if he had known where it was, would have been too painful to look at. A reminder of everything lost, of trust misplaced, of a brotherhood that had been revealed as false. And Peter, the true traitor, lived hidden as a rat in the Weasley family's home, passed from brother to brother, eventually coming into the possession of young Ron Weasley, staying close to the wizarding world, watching and waiting, his secrets safe for now. The Marauders were destroyed, their friendship ended in betrayal and death and imprisonment. The map lay silent in Filch's office, its magic dormant, its purpose forgotten, waiting for the day when new hands would speak its passwords, when new eyes would see its secrets. The mischief was not managed. It was simply over. But even in darkness, dear listener, there are glimmers of hope, though those involved could not yet see them. Harry Potter lived, protected by his mother's sacrifice, by the ancient magic of love that Voldemort could not understand. He would grow up, would attend Hogwarts, would one day discover the map his father had helped create. The story was not over. It was merely sleeping, like the map itself, waiting for the right moment to awaken. For now, let us rest here, in this place between tragedy and hope, acknowledging the darkness, but not dwelling in it. Close your eyes, dear listener, and breathe deeply. Even the saddest stories contain seeds of redemption, and this tale is not yet finished. The map waits, patient as stone, holding all its secrets, and somewhere, a small boy with messy hair and his mother's eyes is growing up, not knowing the legacy that awaits him, not knowing that his father's laughter and love are preserved in enchanted ink, ready to guide him when the time comes. Sleep now, wrapped in the knowledge that love endures, that sacrifice matters, that even when friendships shatter, the best parts of them can survive to bless future generations. The map is silent, but it is not gone, and neither, truly, are the Marauders, for the best parts of them live on in the magic they created, in the love they shared, in the son who survived. Rest now. Rest peacefully. Tomorrow, the map awakens. The Weasley twins discovered the Marauders map during their first year at Hogwarts in the spring of 1990, though the discovery was as much accident as intention. Fred and Gingerhead, identical in appearance, but distinct in the subtle ways only those who knew them well could perceive. Mischievous in the way that seemed to run through the Weasley bloodline like magic itself, had been caught setting off filibusters' fireworks in a corridor. Their punishment was detention with Argus Filch, who delighted in making students miserable, who polished chains he claimed were for hanging students by their thumbs, though he was never permitted to use them, who viewed every young person as a potential criminal waiting to commit their next infraction. Weasleys, he had muttered, his jowls quivering with disgust, should have known. Bad as your brothers, the lot of you. Worse, probably. File these confiscated items while I patrol the corridors. And don't touch anything that doesn't concern you. But telling Fred and George Weasley not to touch things was like telling fire not to burn or water not to flow. It went against their very nature. The moment Filch's limping footsteps faded down the corridor, the twins began exploring his office with the systematic thoroughness of natural treasure hunters. They found drawers full of confiscated pranking supplies, aging items that made them salivate with possibility. They found files documenting decades of student infractions, reading aloud the most entertaining ones in whispered giggles. And then, in a drawer marked confiscated and highly dangerous, beneath a cursed yo-yo and a pack of cards that screamed when shuffled, they found a piece of old, blank parchment. What's this then? Fred held it up to the light. Looks like nothing, George observed, taking it from his brother. Maybe someone tried to cheat on an exam with it. They nearly put it back, but something made Fred hesitate. The parchment felt different in his hands, heavier than it should be, warm with residual magic, as if it were waiting for something, expecting something. Try revealing charms, George suggested, and Fred nodded, pulling out his wand. They tried every spell they knew for revealing hidden writing. Apparitium, Specialis Revelio, even a half-remembered incantation their brother Bill had mentioned once. Nothing worked. The parchment remained stubbornly blank. They were about to give up when George, frustrated, tapped the parchment with his wand and said the first thing that came to his mind. Show yourself. Ink spread across the parchment, but not in revelation, in insult. Mr. Moony presents his compliments to the young man and requests that he keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. The twins stared, then grinned at each other with dawning delight. Mr. Prongs agrees with Mr. Moony and would like to add that the young man's hairstyle is particularly unfortunate. Mr. Padfoot would like to register his astonishment that an idiot like that ever became a student at Hogwarts. Mr. Wormtail bids the young man good day and advises him to wash his hair, the slime ball. Fred let out a snort of laughter that he quickly muffled with his hand. George's eyes were shining with the light of discovery. They had found something special, something that spoke their language, something created by kindred spirits. Brilliant, Fred breathed. Absolutely brilliant. They spent the next hour trying different phrases, different approaches, treating the parchment like a puzzle to be solved, a secret to be unlocked. They complimented it, threatened it, cajoled it, and insulted themselves to see if it would respond more kindly. It did not. Finally, George tried something different. "We mean no harm," he said softly to the parchment. "We're friends, not enemies. We solemnly swear we are up to no good." The parchment erupted with ink, lines spreading like rivers across its surface, forming corridors and classrooms, towers and dungeons, the entire layout of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, rendered in perfect detail. And throughout it, moving slowly, were tiny dots labeled with names. The twins stared in reverent silence, their minds racing with possibilities, their hearts singing with the joy of discovery. This was more than a map. This was freedom, power, the key to mischief beyond their wildest dreams. "We have to take it," Fred whispered. "Filch will notice it's gone," George countered, but his tone suggested he was searching for solutions rather than offering genuine objections. "We'll replace it with a blank parchment. He'll never know." They did exactly that, and when Filch returned to dismiss them from detention, the real map was hidden safely in Fred's robes, while an ordinary piece of parchment lay in the drawer, marked, confiscated, and highly dangerous. Filch never noticed the switch. For the next 3 years, the Weasley twins used the Marauders map to establish themselves as the greatest pranksters Hogwarts had seen in decades, perhaps since the Marauders themselves. They learned every secret passage it revealed, used it to avoid prefects and teachers, planned elaborate pranks with military precision, thanks to the map's real-time tracking of every person in the castle. They treated the map with the reverence it deserved, dear listener, understanding instinctively that they held something precious, something created by masters of their craft. They studied its personality, the way it insulted Snape with particular venom, the way it seemed almost fond of students who reminded it of its creators, the way its ink glowed just slightly brighter when mischief was afoot. "Whoever made this," George said one night, as they lay in their dormitory studying the map by wandlight. "They were like us." "Better than us," Fred corrected. "At least for now. But we're learning." They experimented with the map's limits, discovering that it couldn't track the room of requirement, which they hadn't yet learned about, that it showed animals but couldn't distinguish between normal rats and animagi, that it had blind spots in certain heavily warded areas. They mapped these limitations carefully, always seeking to understand the magic they had inherited. The map showed them secret passages they never would have found otherwise. Routes from Gryffindor Tower to Hogsmeade that bypassed all the normal security, hidden corridors that connected distant parts of the castle, priest holes and concealed doorways that dated back to Hogwarts' founding. They used these passages to procure supplies from Hogsmeade for their pranking enterprises, to sneak into the kitchens for midnight feasts, to explore parts of the castle that few living students had ever seen. The map made them bold, gave them confidence, allowed them to push boundaries in ways that honored its creator's legacy. But Fred and George Weasley, for all their mischief, had something their predecessors had cultivated only later: wisdom tempered with kindness. Their pranks were never cruel, never targeted the vulnerable, never crossed lines into genuine harm. They inherited not just the Marauders' map, but the best parts of the Marauders' philosophy: that laughter was powerful, that authority needed challenging, but that ultimately magic worked best when it brought joy rather than pain. In the autumn of 1993, the twins made a decision that would prove more significant than they could have known. Their younger brother Ron was in his 3rd year, and he was having a difficult time. Ron's best friend was Harry Potter, the boy who lived famous throughout the wizarding world, the focus of constant attention and whispered speculation. Harry was dealing with more than the usual trials of adolescence. Sirius Black had escaped from Azkaban, the first prisoner ever to do so, and the entire wizarding world believed he was hunting Harry, seeking to finish the job his master Voldemort had started. Dementors patrolled the school grounds, their presence casting literal and metaphorical shadows over everything, draining happiness and hope from the very air. The twins noticed Harry's stress, noticed how he jumped at shadows, how he seemed burdened by fears he couldn't quite articulate. They remembered being younger, remembered feeling overwhelmed by the castle's vastness and the world's expectations, and they felt something unfamiliar, not just mischief, but compassion, the desire to help rather than merely entertain. "We should give it to him," Fred said one December evening, holding the map in his hands. "What?" George looked up from the prank supplies they were cataloguing. "The map. We should give it to Harry." George was quiet for a moment, understanding the significance of what his twin was suggesting. They had guarded the map jealously for 3 years, had come to think of it almost as their own creation. Giving it up meant surrendering their greatest advantage, their most precious tool. But it also meant passing on a legacy, continuing a tradition, doing what the map's creators might have wanted, helping someone who needed it, particularly someone who shared their blood in a manner of speaking. James Potter had created this magic. Harry Potter was his son. The symmetry was almost poetic. "You're right," George said finally. "He needs it more than we do. We know the castle well enough now anyway." They approached Harry one evening when he sat alone in the common room, his face troubled, his homework ignored before him. The twins exchanged a glance. Then Fred pulled out the map with the ceremony it deserved. "We've come to give you a bit of festive cheer," Fred announced. "Early Christmas present," George added. Harry looked up, confused, as Fred placed the blank parchment before him. "What's that supposed to be?" "This, Harry, is the secret of our success," Fred said solemnly. "It's a wrench giving it to you," George admitted. "But we decided last night, your need's greater than ours." They showed him how to activate it, speaking the words, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. Harry's eyes widened as the map revealed itself, as he saw for the first time the full layout of his school, the moving dots, the secret passages marked clearly. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Harry read slowly, running his finger over the names at the top of the map. Who were they? Don't know. Fred shrugged, though he had wondered the same thing countless times. Probably students who made this map years ago. Brilliant wizards, whoever they were. They explained how to use it, showed him the passage to Hogsmeade, warned him about which corridors were most heavily patrolled. And then, with a final mischief managed, to demonstrate how to hide the map again, they left Harry with his inheritance, though none of them understood the full significance of what had just transpired. Harry's relationship with the map was different from the twins, dear listener, because for Harry, the map was more than just a tool. It was a connection to a father he had never known, created by hands he had never held, infused with magic that carried his family's touch. He used it to sneak into Hogsmeade when he wasn't supposed to avoid trouble, to keep watch for danger. But he also found himself simply staring at it sometimes, watching the castle's inhabitants move about their lives, wondering about the people who had created such magic, wondering if they had been anything like him. The map showed him things he needed to see, like the night he spotted Peter Pettigrew's name on it. Impossible, because Peter was supposed to be dead, supposedly murdered by Sirius Black 12 years earlier. The name appeared in his dormitory, attached to a dot that moved with his rat scabber's erratic patterns. That discovery would lead to revelations that would change everything. The truth about his father's friends, about betrayal and loyalty, about Sirius Black's innocence and Peter Pettigrew's guilt. The map, in revealing Peter's presence, would help restore the name of one Marauder and expose the treachery of another. When Remus Lupin, now a professor at Hogwarts, confiscated the map from Harry later that year, his hands had trembled as he held it. He recognized it instantly, though he said nothing to Harry in that moment. Alone in his office, he activated it with the old words, spoken in a voice rough with memory and loss. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. The map revealed itself, and Remus wept, for James and Lily, for Sirius imprisoned and suffering, for Peter's betrayal, for his own loneliness, for everything that had been lost, but also, perhaps, for this evidence that something of their friendship had survived, had continued to work good magic in the world, had found its way to James's son as if by destiny. He studied it for hours that night, remembering the creation of each enchantment, recognizing James's transfiguration work in the flowing ink, Sirius's dark magic in the detection charms, his own patience in the connection to the castle, even Peter's meticulous attention to detail in the accurate mapping. They had been young and brilliant and doomed, but they had also been talented enough to create something that lasted, that mattered, that continued to help and protect even after they were gone. When Severus Snape encountered the map later, when it insulted him with the same venom it had shown 20 years earlier, his face had gone white with rage and old pain. He recognized the writing style, the particular cruelty of the insults, and understood exactly who had created this artifact. The memories it stirred were bitter, of his own school days, of being tormented by James Potter and Sirius Black, of humiliations that still burn decades later. But even Snape, in his anger, could recognize the magic's sophistication. The map was a masterwork, however much he hated its creators. The map continued to serve Harry throughout his years at Hogwarts, dear listener. It helped him navigate dangers that the twins never faced, warned him of threats its creators never imagined. It showed him when Dolores Umbridge was approaching during his 5th year, allowing Dumbledore's army to scatter before being caught. It helped him search for Horcruxes within the castle during his final year, guiding him through passages while war raged around him. The map had been created for mischief, but it became a tool for survival, for resistance, for the very battle against darkness that its creators had fought and, in some cases, died fighting. And through it all, the map maintained its personality, still insulting Snape, still responding to the old passwords, still showing the castle as 4 boys had known it decades earlier, preserved perfectly, like a memory made tangible, like friendship given form. The Marauders' map had awakened, and in awakening, it had found new purpose, new hands, new stories to be part of. The mischief was far from over. It was simply beginning again, generation after generation, passing from hand to hand, carrying forward the legacy of 4 boys who had loved Hogwarts enough to map every inch of it, who had loved each other enough to become animagi, who had created magic that would outlast their lives and their friendship. Rest now, dear listener, in the warmth of knowing that the best parts of us survive, in what we create, in what we pass on, in the love we weave into the magic we make. The map glows softly with purpose renewed, and somewhere, perhaps, 4 friends smile in whatever place beyond life holds such souls, seeing their creations still working good magic in the world. Close your eyes and drift toward dreams. The map watches over Hogwarts, still. Tomorrow, we speak of legacies. The Second Wizarding War concluded on a spring morning in 1998, when Harry Potter faced Lord Voldemort in the grounds of Hogwarts and emerged victorious, not through superior power, but through the same magic that had saved him as an infant: love, sacrifice, and the choice to protect others even at cost to himself. The castle, which had witnessed 1,000 years of magic, had never seen a battle like this. Its corridors scarred by curses, its walls cracked by the clash of ancient powers, its stones stained with the blood of those who had fought to defend it. When the dust settled and the dead were counted, when the sun rose on a world finally free of Voldemort's shadow, Harry Potter sat in the ruins of the castle and pulled the Marauders' map from his pocket. It had survived the battle, as it had survived everything else, still intact, still functional, still showing the castle's inhabitants as they moved through the damaged corridors, tending to wounded, searching for lost ones, beginning the slow work of healing. The map showed fewer dots now than it had once displayed. So many names that had moved across its surface were gone. Students who would never graduate, professors who would never teach again, defenders who had given everything to protect a future they would not see. Harry traced the empty corridors with his finger, remembering all who had been lost, including Remus Lupin, the last of his father's friends, who had died in the battle alongside his wife Tonks, leaving behind an infant son named Teddy. Remus had been the last living Marauder, the last one who had helped create this map, the last connection to those days of boyhood friendship and innocent mischief. With his death, all 4 creators had passed beyond the veil, their stories complete, their lives spent in ways both glorious and tragic. But the map remained, dear listener, proof that something of them endured, that their magic had outlasted their mortality. Harry held the parchment gently, understanding now what he had been too young to grasp when the Weasley twins first gave it to him. This was more than a tool, more than a clever enchantment. This was his father's laughter preserved in ink, his father's talent made tangible, his father's friendship given form. This was proof that James Potter had been young once, had been creative and brilliant and full of life, had loved his friends enough to spend years creating something that would serve and protect even after he was gone. "Thank you," Harry whispered to the map, to his father, to all the Marauders. "Thank you for this gift." The map, of course, said nothing. It simply continued showing Hogwarts, faithful and patient, waiting to serve whoever held it next. In the years that followed, as the wizarding world slowly healed from the wounds of war, as Hogwarts was rebuilt stone by stone, corridor by corridor, the Marauder's map remained in Harry's possession. He kept it safe, tucked away in a drawer in his home, bringing it out occasionally to study, to remember, to feel connected to the father he had never known. Harry married Ginny Weasley, Ron's sister, whose own courage and fire reminded him sometimes of Lily Evans, the woman his father had loved. They built a life together, a family, had 3 children who filled their home with the kind of chaos and joy that can only come from young magic users learning to control their powers. Their oldest son they named James Sirius Potter, after both his grandfather and his godfather, carrying forward names that deserve to be remembered with honor rather than tragedy. Their second son was Albus Severus, named for 2 of the most complex wizards Harry had known, 2 men who had made difficult choices in service of protecting him. And their daughter was Lily Luna, carrying her grandmother's name, the name of a woman whose love had literally saved the wizarding world. As the children grew, Harry would sometimes find himself in his study late at night, the house quiet around him, and he would pull out the Marauder's map. He would activate it with the familiar words, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," and watch the corridors of Hogwarts appear, even though the castle was miles away. The map's magic was so perfectly crafted that it continued to function regardless of distance, still connected to the castle as Remus had enchanted it to be all those years ago. Harry could see the new generation of students moving through those halls, children of people he had known, children of the war, children growing up in the peace that so many had died to secure. Among those dots, eventually, would be his own children's names, and the thought filled him with emotions too complex to name. Pride and fear and hope all tangled together. He wondered what his father would think, seeing his grandson bearing his name, seeing the Potter line continuing, seeing that Voldemort's attempt to end their family had ultimately failed. He wondered if James would be proud of the man Harry had become, the choices he had made, the family he had built. The map offered no answers, but somehow its presence was comforting anyway, a connection across time, a conversation across the veil between life and death, a reminder that love, when woven into magic, never truly dies. When James Sirius Potter turned 11 and received his Hogwarts letter, Harry made a decision. He sat his son down in his study, the same study where the map had rested for over a decade, and pulled open the drawer where it lay hidden. "There's something I want to give you," Harry said, his voice carrying the weight of significance. "Not now, not yet, But when the time is right, when you've learned enough about responsibility and consequences, when you understand that power should be used wisely. What is it? James asked, leaning forward with the eager curiosity that Harry recognized from his own childhood, that perhaps echoed back even further to the grandfather James had never met. Harry pulled out the map, but didn't activate it, letting his son see only the blank parchment. "This," he said carefully, "is called the Marauders map. It was created by 4 boys when they were at Hogwarts. One of them was your grandfather, my father, the man you're named after. Along with his best friends, he made something extraordinary, something that helped me more times than I can count when I was at school." James's eyes widened with interest and pride. "What does it do?" "It shows Hogwarts," Harry explained. "Every corridor, every classroom, every secret passage, and more than that, it shows every person in the castle exactly where they are, in real time. It's powerful magic, James, the kind of magic that requires great skill and great trust." "Can I have it?" James asked immediately, predictably. Harry smiled, shaking his head. "Not yet. First, you need to prove yourself. You need to show me that you understand the difference between mischief and cruelty, between breaking rules for good reasons and breaking them just because you can. Your grandfather and his friends were brilliant, but they weren't perfect. They made mistakes, hurt people they shouldn't have hurt, crossed lines they shouldn't have crossed. I want you to learn from their wisdom without repeating their errors." James nodded, though Harry could see the impatience in his eyes, the burning desire to possess this piece of family history, this connection to the grandfather he would never meet. "When you're ready," Harry promised, "it will be yours. This is your legacy, your inheritance, but legacy comes with responsibility." And so, the map waited, patient as always, for the next generation to prove worthy of its magic. The years continued their steady march, dear listener, as they always do. James Sirius did eventually earn the map, proving himself mature enough to handle its power, though not before several incidents that tested Harry's patience and reminded him uncomfortably of his own father's youthful arrogance. The map passed into James's hands with appropriate ceremony, Harry teaching him the activation words, watching his son's face light up with wonder as the enchantment revealed itself. "Your grandfather made this," Harry said, his hand on his son's shoulder. "He was your age, just a student, but he was talented enough to create magic that has lasted for generations. You carry his name, James. Try to carry his best qualities too, his loyalty, his bravery, his fierce protection of those he loved, and try to learn from his mistakes, from the times he was cruel or thoughtless, from the ways he had to grow and change to become the man your grandmother fell in love with." James held the map reverently, understanding that he held more than parchment and ink. He held history, held connection, held the preserved essence of great-grandparents he would never meet, but whose magic literally flowed through his veins. The younger Potter children, Albus and Lily, would eventually gain access to the map as well, all 3 siblings using it together sometimes, their heads bent over its surface in the Gryffindor common room, for all 3 were sorted into their father's house, planning adventures that were tamer than the Marauders' exploits, but no less joyful for that. They discovered that the map still showed Peeves, who had been haunting Hogwarts for centuries and showed no signs of stopping. They learned that it couldn't track students in the Room of Requirement, which had hidden Dumbledore's army and would hide other secrets in years to come. They found that it still insulted Snape, even though Severus Snape had long since passed away. The map's programming so thorough that it recognized his name in the castle's records and responded with the same venom it had shown 50 years earlier. The map doesn't forgive or forget, Albus observed once, watching the insults appear when they tested it with Snape's name. It remembers everything its creators felt. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Lily suggested. Maybe we're supposed to remember the good and the bad, the joy and the pain. Maybe that's what keeps us from repeating mistakes. Their father, overhearing this conversation, felt a swell of pride. His children were learning the lessons the map had to teach, that magic was powerful, that actions had consequences, that the past shaped the present in ways both obvious and subtle. At Hogwarts itself, the map became something of a legend among students who knew of its existence. Not everyone did. The Potter children kept it mostly secret, sharing its revelations with only their closest friends, maintaining the tradition of discretion that had protected it for generations. But stories circulated anyway, whispers of a magical map that showed everything, that had been created by the famous Harry Potter's father, that contained enchantments that even modern magical theorists couldn't fully understand or replicate. Professors who remembered Harry's time at school would sometimes smile when students appeared where they shouldn't be, emerging from passages that required knowledge of castle secrets to access. They knew or suspected that the old map still functioned, still served its purpose, still guided students through the castle's mysteries. Professor McGonagall, now headmistress, ancient and sharp-eyed as ever, definitely knew. She had confiscated the map from the original Marauders more times than she could count, had seen it in Harry's possession decades later, and recognized its handiwork when Potter grandchildren appeared in her office seeking permission for some scheme or another. She never demanded they turn it over, never truly tried to confiscate it permanently. Perhaps she remembered James Potter, arrogant and talented, and ultimately brave, who had died too young protecting his family. Perhaps she remembered Sirius Black, who had chosen Gryffindor over his family's expectations and paid terrible prices for that choice. Perhaps she even remembered Remus Lupin, who had taught at Hogwarts himself, bringing quiet wisdom and hard-won compassion to his role as defense against the dark arts professor. Or perhaps she simply understood that some magic was meant to be passed down, that some legacies deserved to continue, that Hogwarts itself was enriched by the presence of artifacts like the Marauder's map, reminders that students had always pushed boundaries, had always sought to know the castle's secrets, had always combined brilliance with mischief in ways both exasperating and admirable. As decades passed and the 21st century deepened, the Marauder's map continued its patient existence, passing from Potter child to Potter grandchild, each generation learning its secrets, each adding their own stories to the legend. The parchment showed signs of age now, slight yellowing at the edges, tiny creases from being folded and unfolded thousands of times, the faintest wearing of the ink in the most frequently viewed corridors. But the magic held strong, as perfectly functional as the day it was created, testament to the skill of 4 15-year-old boys who had poured everything they had into making something that would last. The enchantments showed no signs of fading. The connection to Hogwarts remained as strong as ever, and the map's personality, that cheeky, irreverent voice of the Marauders themselves, persisted unchanged. New students continued to discover its wonders, continued to be amazed by magic that their own professors often couldn't replicate, continued to feel the thrill of using forbidden knowledge to explore forbidden spaces. The map made them feel powerful, clever, connected to something larger than themselves, exactly as it had made the Marauders feel, exactly as it had made Harry Potter feel, exactly as it was designed to do. And occasionally, late at night when the castle was quiet and the stars wheeled overhead, students using the map might feel something more, a sense of presence, perhaps, as if the map's creators were somehow still aware of it, still pleased to see their creations serving its purpose, still present in the magic they had woven so carefully all those years ago. James Potter, who had never lived to see his son grow up, who had died at 21, with so much life still ahead of him, he lived on in the map's precise transfiguration work, in every flowing line of ink, in every perfect representation of the castle he had loved. Sirius Black, who had spent 12 years in prison for crimes he didn't commit, who had died just when he might have known freedom and happiness again. He lived on in the map's dark magic, in its ability to detect and track, in its connection to old family spells transformed to serve light rather than darkness. Remus Lupin, who had carried the burden of lycanthropy from childhood, who had found acceptance and brotherhood with boys who became animagi for his sake. He lived on in the map's deep connection to Hogwarts itself, in the patient, careful magic that bound the enchantment to the castle's ancient stones. And even Peter Pettigrew, whose betrayal had shattered their brotherhood, whose cowardice had led to death and suffering, even he lived on in the map's meticulous detail, in the careful mapping of every passage, in the precision of every measurement, proof that even the smallest contribution to something beautiful matters, even when the contributor themselves falls into darkness. The true magic of the Marauders map, dear listener, was never just in its enchantments or its usefulness or its clever personality. The true magic was in what it represented. 4 boys who had loved each other enough to spend years creating something together, who had combined their individual talents into something greater than any of them could have achieved alone, who had preserved their friendship in ink and parchment so perfectly that it continued to help and guide and protect long after they themselves were gone. The map was a love letter to friendship, to the bonds that form in youth and shape everything that follows. It was proof that what we create together matters, that collaboration produces magic more powerful than any individual spell, that the best parts of ourselves can survive our deaths if we pour them into work that serves others. Every student who used the map inherited not just a tool, but a philosophy, that rules were meant to be questioned, that authority was meant to be challenged, that mischief managed well could be a form of resistance, of joy, of fully embracing life and magic and possibility, but also that with power came responsibility, that pranks should never become cruelty, that the purpose of knowledge was to help and protect, not merely to elevate oneself. The Marauders had been flawed, arrogant at times, cruel at times, reckless often, but they had also been brilliant and loyal and brave, and they had created something that embodied the best of what they could be, the highest expression of their friendship and their magic. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy anyone can leave. Not perfection, but the best version of themselves, preserved and offered freely to those who come after, a gift across time that says, we were here, we loved each other, we made this together, may it serve you well. Now, dear listener, as our tale draws to its close, as your breathing slows and your thoughts begin to drift toward dreams, let us rest with this image. The Marauder's map lying open on a table in Hogwarts, its ink glowing softly in candlelight, showing the castle alive with students pursuing their own adventures, making their own memories, writing their own stories into the ancient stones. The map watches over them all, patient and faithful, carrying within its enchantments the laughter of 4 boys who grew into men, the love that bound them together, the magic they created when they worked as one. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs are their names, preserved forever at the top of the parchment, a reminder that they existed, that they mattered, that what they made together was worth making. The mischief is managed, but the magic endures. The friends are gone, but their friendship remains. The map sleeps now, as you too should sleep, dear listener, wrapped in the warmth of knowing that love, woven into magic, lasts forever, that friendship preserved with care can guide generations, that the best parts of us survive in what we create together. Close your eyes now. Let your breathing deepen. Feel yourself drifting gently toward rest. The map is safe. The castle sleeps. The stars wheel overhead. And somewhere, perhaps, 4 friends smile, seeing their creation still working good magic in the world, still helping, still protecting, still spreading the kind of mischief that makes life worth living. I solemnly swear, I am up to no good. The map reveals itself one final time, showing a castle at peace, students dreaming in their dormitories, the future stretching bright and unwritten before them. Mischief managed. The map goes blank, its work complete for now, waiting patiently for the next adventure, the next generation, the next chapter in its endless story. Sleep now, dear listener. Sleep well. The map watches over us all.